making $1,000, look, we will have to decrease your benefit by 20% because you know from Bismarck in the 19th century was wrong, and therefore, no, it's ridiculous, it's cruel, it's unfair. I strongly believe in supporting the very needy, the very vulnerable. What I do not believe is in a transfer society where everyone transferred to everyone according to political pressure and a huge, big government telling some people to pay taxes to finance others who may not even need that financing. So that was the first rule, and therefore no people of old age and no people above 55 years old had anything to fear from a reform like this. And the second very important decision that in a way was the silver bullet, as you call it in America, for getting the support of the population, was that even though I think this is a very good idea, of course, I may be wrong, and the people may not like it. So when I explained the idea to the people on television, I told them, look, this will be a choice, a voluntary choice. That is, if you like the pay-as-you-go government system, you trust the government more than the market, you are against accumulating capital, you hate little passbook accounts, stay in the government system. I respect you. Or maybe you are too old. But if you like this idea, you can opt out. Now, it would be very easy for a 25-year-old person to opt out even for getting the past contributions. But for a 50-year-old person, it will be very difficult because they will not have enough time to accumulate money in 15 years. So we define something that is very interesting. It's called a recognition bond. We know that the system is unfunded, so the government does not have the money. So what I did was to calculate the accrued value of the benefits of every single worker in Chile. And this was 1980. Before Bill Gates was a dropout in Harvard, so there were no computers and software. We had to go in little pieces of paper, calculating for every single worker the present value of the vested benefits already accrued. And we call that a recognition bond. That is a treasury bill. Now, the government didn't have the money even to pay the interest, so I defined a zero-coupon treasury bill with a 4% real rate of interest that the government cashes when the person reaches 65, when the government will have to pay anyway his or her retirement. So we told every worker in Chile, if you decide to opt out, you opt out with a recognition bond, that you give it to the pension manager. I even asked the pension managers in the little passbook to have two lines, one with the monthly contribution and the other with the accrued value of the recognition bond. So even though the money was not there, I wanted the people to know that they had more money than just the monthly contribution, and then a final total amount. Incidentally, these are samples, because my passbook is in the hands of Alan Greenspan. Once I testify at Senator Phil Gramm Banking or Securities Committee, it went very well, bipartisan. Let me tell you very clear that I am completely bipartisan. I'm a foreign citizen. I respect enormously your democracy, so I would never take sides on a Democrat, Republican, or left or right. As Ezra mentioned, I was invited to speak at the White House Social Security system by President Clinton. And I was invited to have dinner in Austin, Texas with George and Laura Bush. I have met as many times with Senator Phil Gramm from Texas as with former Senator Bob Kerrey from Nebraska. And both are very decent, very intelligent people who became strong supporters of this idea. Anyway, I testify with Phil Gramm, and after lunch I received a call from the senator's office that he was so happy with this that he invited me to dinner that night with the chairman of the Federal Reserve. I said, of course, how could I refuse? I had never met Mr. Greenspan. He wanted me to explain the whole thing to him. We did that night. That night it went extremely well. He was very interested in the recognition bond, on the technique of financing the transition. But at some moment, when I showed my little passbook, Chairman Greenspan reached across the table because he wanted to look at the fine print. You know how Chairman Greenspan is. He liked to, so he wanted so he began asking the most really intelligent, perceptive question that I have maybe ever had in my life. I think I surpassed the test because he later on came in favor of this idea in his testimonies. But then at the end of the dinner, I see that the chairman take my passbook and put it into his pocket. So, well, you know, I like humor. So I said, Mr. Chairman, nobody can leave the room because you are taking away my retirement account. And then he's a little shy. He's very incredibly nice. He said, oh, Jose, I was wrong. And he begins to look for it. And I said, no, Mr. Chairman, of course you can keep it. Now, this night I will call the pension manager in Chile to block the balance because it will be incredibly unfair for a citizen of a poor country to subsidize the man who can print money. So, if you need a little extra benefit, go to the basement, I don't know, print a little dollars, but please don't take my account. So he has my personal account. And I meet him once a year in conference around the world, and he's so gracious as to say, Jose, in my desk, I show it to every visitor. So he has my personal account. I am extremely proud of that. And that will be, of course, in my memoirs someday. So the third difficult thing, and I will not do it today, but believe me, we did it in Chile. I am an economist. You can always design a viable financing strategy because some people believe that there is something called the transition cost. No, there is no economic cost. We economists talk of economic cost when some reform, for example, going from a protectionist economy to a free trade one, because of lacks in adjustment and difficulties in moving labor and capital from one sector to another, you have a decline in GNP for some years. And therefore you have an economic cost in GNP. Your country for some years is poorer because you are doing that or that other reform. And even then it may be useful to do the reform because the present value of the reform is higher than the cost. But in the case of this there is no economic cost whatsoever. On the contrary, my former professor from Harvard, Martin Feldstein, has written a paper saying that the present value of this reform to the American economy, because of improving productivity in labor and capital market, is between 10 and 20 trillions. The value of this reform, according to Martin Feldstein, not to me, is between 10 and 20 trillions of dollars. So there is a huge economic benefit, basically higher rates of economic growth, more saving, more investment, better allocation of capital, etc., etc. So what you need is different. It's a cash flow problem. You have to invest at the beginning in order to finance the people who keep retiring while at the same time the contributions are going to the personal account. But at the end of the day, you are reducing your unfunded liability. You are paying the debt. So if you do it in present value terms, the reform has a net benefit from the first day. Now, of course, you have to find the fiscal solution, and there are many ways. You can cut spending, raise taxes, privatize state assets, keep a transition tax for some period, etc. That is a menu that has to be different for every country. In my country, we were able to do it without raising any tax rate. And today in Chile, after 25 years of reform, we are already reaping the dividend of a reform. Chile this year will have a budget surplus of 4% of GNP, without counting the fact that we are paying another 3% in recognition bonds. So the real budget surplus of Chile this year is 7% of GNP. And in 20 years, the old people will pass away. Again, a source of great sadness for their family, but a source of great joy for the Treasury Secretary of Chile at that moment, because he will have a huge budget surplus. And I'm already proposing to reduce personal income taxes and so on, as the dividend of this social security reform. And finally, and extremely important, you have to educate the citizens. I had a weekly television program for a year before